I wake up the next morning from a deep, dreamless sleep to the sound of my alarm clock going off. It's weird for me to sleep through the entire night without waking up, but I suppose I was so exhausted from yesterday that it makes sense. I shut off the alarm, quickly climb out of bed, and head into the bathroom to take a quick shower. As I wait for the shower to heat up, I look at myself in the bathroom mirror, still not at all used to my transformation. I had been so incredibly insecure about how skinny I was for so long and was always desperate to put on muscle. But no matter how much I ate and worked out, my muscles refused to grow. Apparently, all it took to look like an amateur bodybuilder was to get hit by a radioactive meteor. I'm so distracted flexing and shadowboxing in the mirror that I forget about the running water until the steam from the shower begins to fog up the mirror. Once I notice it, I quickly brush my teeth and then jump into the shower. After showing Tessa the massive scar on my back last night, I was expecting the hot water to irritate it even worse than usual. However, I'm pleasantly surprised when I find that my back feels perfectly fine. I even get a little cocky and turn around to let the hot water spray directly onto it, which I never do because it's too painful, but for once, there's absolutely no pain. With a smile still on my face from my lack of back pain, I turn off the running water and step out of the shower. After quickly drying off, I remember that General Walker told us that we will be starting our training today, whatever that'll be. So I dress accordingly and put on a t-shirt, gym shorts, and running shoes. I then look over at the alarm clock and see that it's 9:50. So I go to grab my wallet and the picture of my father from where I set them on top of the cabinet before thinking that I should probably just leave them in the room. So I only take my room key and then walk out of the room. I knock on Tessa's door and she answers almost immediately.
Hey,
she says. Hey, I say back, smiling. Tessa's dressed similar to me, wearing red gym shorts, a black tank top, and a pair of running shoes. Her long hair is pulled back in a ponytail, and when she notices my good mood, she smiles back at me. She shuts the door behind her, and together, we walk down the hallway towards the elevators. How'd you sleep? I ask her.
Surprisingly, pretty well. How about you?
She replies, like a baby. Those beds are so comfortable.
I know. It was a struggle to get out of bed this morning.
We reach the elevator and I push the button. The doors open almost instantly and the two of us step inside. Tessa swipes her keycard and presses the button that has the number 1 on it. The doors then shut and the elevator begins to descend. What do you think this training will be like? I ask. She shakes her head.
I have no idea. I just hope it won't be too hardcore.
A part of me agrees with her, considering I haven't worked out since I quit boxing, which was over 3 months ago. However, another part of me remembers all the incredible things I did yesterday. Lifting up the meteor, running from the parking lot to the front of the school in seconds, stopping a school bus with my bare hands, and I kinda wanna push myself to see what I'm truly capable of. The elevator stops and the doors slide open. Tessa and I walk through the lobby and head towards the cafeteria. On our way there, we pass by the reception desk, but instead of the usual friendly blonde woman, there's a dark-haired lady with glasses standing there, who gives us a subtle nod as we walk by instead of a friendly wave. The two of us nod back and then walk down the hallway beside the desk before entering the cafeteria. Just like last night, the room is almost completely empty except for about 30 or so agents who are spread out around the different tables eating breakfast. General Walker, along with a couple of agents, are sitting in the same place where he spoke to us last night, so Tessa and I walk over to him. He's looking down at a file and doesn't notice us until I speak up. Good morning, General Walker, I say to get his attention. General Walker quickly closes the file he's reading and looks up at us. Josh, Tessa, why don't the two of you go get something to eat and then we'll talk about what's in store for today. Tessa and I walk over to the buffet, which is now full of your standard breakfast foods. I take some bacon and fried eggs while Tessa grabs a bagel with cream cheese. After getting our food, we walk back over to General Walker and sit down across from him. General Walker continues to study his file while Tessa and I eat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, I decide to break the silence. So what kind of training will we be doing? He looks at me and says, we strongly believe that the best way to test and control your strength is by doing lots of training and exercise. Your training won't be anything too complicated. I figure that the two of you will start your workouts with lots of running and other typical cardio, and then you'll move on to some weightlifting and upper body exercises. You'll then be taken to the firing range to work on your accuracy with firearms. And finally, you'll also be trained in both hand-to-hand and armed combat. However, considering today is only your orientation, things might be a little different. Although I want to say that I would rather skip all the running and cardio and go straight to weightlifting, I decide not to argue with the decisions of people who are trying to figure out how to stop us from exploding. So I just continue to silently eat my breakfast. Tessa, on the other hand, is staring at General Walker with an odd expression on her face. It seems to be a mixture of anger and disappointment.
Why would we need shooting and combat training?
She asks him. General Walker looks over at her and seems to be mentally preparing himself for an uncomfortable argument. He takes his time answering Tessa's question, and after a few moments of silence, he finally sighs and says, Okay, I haven't been completely honest with the two of you. Tessa and I immediately stop eating to give him our full attention. It's not every day when someone who said they won't lie to you confesses that they were, in fact, lying to you. The N.R.C. has this official rule stating that any reactor who is able to control their abilities and complete the mandatory training will be offered a chance to become an N.R.C. agent. Even though you two are the only reactors who are able to even somewhat control their abilities, I'm still obligated to potentially make you two agents if your training goes well. I told you that this training is mainly to help you control your abilities. That much is true. However, it is also to test if you are capable of becoming agents. I didn't want to tell the two of you yet because you've only been here less than a day, and both of you are too young to become agents anyway. After General Walker finishes talking, an awkward silence looms over our table. Tessa stares down at her hands, unable to meet her father's eyes, and tries to process what General Walker said. I sit there silently too, but it's not because what General Walker said freaked me out or angered me. It actually intrigues me. What if we wanted to become N.R.C. agents? I asked General Walker. Tessa jerks her head up and stares at me in shock. I figured that she wouldn't be happy that I'm asking this and basically letting General Walker off the hook for lying to us, but my curiosity forces me to ask anyway. General Walker also seems pretty surprised by my question. Well, as I said, you two are a bit young and you will need to complete the necessary training to see if you are capable of becoming N.R.C. agents. However, if the two of you truly want to become agents, then that could be a possibility. I try my best to keep from looking too excited at his response, but it's tough because the idea of working for a secret organization that stops illegal nuclear experimentation sounds like the coolest thing ever. However, as I look over at Tessa, I see that she's staring at me with the same look of anger and disappointment that she's giving her father, and all my excitement disappears. General Walker stands up and says, "Now, if the two of you are finished eating, then it's time to begin the orientation to your training." I stand up too and look over at Tessa as she slowly gets up from her seat. General Walker and the few agents who are sitting near him start walking out of the cafeteria, and Tessa follows behind without saying a word to me. I start following as well, but I stay a few paces behind Tessa because she's obviously mad at me about wanting to become an N.R.C. agent. We follow General Walker and the agents out of the cafeteria and towards the lobby. As I watch Tessa quietly walk along in front of me, I decide that it's probably best if I just apologize to her, so that she knows I understand I said the wrong thing. So I quicken my pace to catch up with Tessa and then match her stride. "I'm sorry about asking if we could become agents." I tell her quietly so that the agents in front of us can't overhear. She stays silent for a few seconds before finally saying,
It's okay.
"Are you sure?" I ask, because it seems like you're pretty upset about what I said. She looks at me.
I'm not upset because of what you said, Josh. I'm just mad at my father.
"Oh," I say, trying not to sound too relieved. The two of us follow General Walker and the agents out the front doors of the building. Our small group then heads towards a few jeeps that are parked out front.
I'm also a bit mad at myself.
She says, so quietly that I can barely hear it. "Why are you mad at yourself?" She sighs.
Because my father offered us a chance to work for the N.R.C. and use our abilities to help people. And I don't want to. I feel like I'm being so selfish.
I stop walking and hold my arm out so that Tessa stops too. General Walker and the agents notice that we've stopped, but they don't say anything. They just stand by the jeeps and wait for us. "You're not being selfish, Tessa," I tell her.
Yes, I am.
She answers immediately.
I'm giving up the opportunity to basically become a superhero. What does that make me?
"Normal," I say. I'm struggling to figure out the perfect thing to say to make her feel better. "Look, Tessa, when my father died, I felt like it was my fault, and, as you know, a part of me still does. I won't ever forget how I wasn't able to save him, but it will make me feel so much better if I'm able to save other people so that their families won't have to suffer the way my mother and I did. It's like you told me last night. This thought is pushing me to want to do better, and I really think that working for the N.R.C. is the best way I can do better."
I understand why you feel that way, but I don't. And I have no excuse why, besides the fact that I'm incredibly selfish.
Tessa says. "Let me finish." She crosses her arms and stares at me. "You may have also been through a traumatic experience when your mother died, but you don't blame yourself for her death. You have no reason to want to do this, and you deserve a normal life. It is not selfish to want what you deserve, so please, don't be mad at yourself." It finally seems like I've gotten through to her because although she doesn't respond, she does nod and look to be in a better mood. So the two of us turn and walk over to the jeeps where General Walker and the agents are impatiently waiting for us. "Are you two ready now?" General Walker asks with a bit of annoyance in his voice. Tessa nods and I say, "Yes, sir." "Good," he says as he climbs into the passenger seat of the first jeep. As if on cue, all the agents except for one begin getting into the other jeep while that one agent hops into the driver's seat of General Walker's. Not wanting to hold the group up any more than we already have, Tessa and I quickly get into the back of the first Jeep. The second our seatbelts are buckled, we begin driving towards the gym. However, considering the gym is right beside the bunks and we could have easily just walked, in what seems like seconds, we arrive in front of the building. When we do, General Walker turns around and looks at me. "So Josh, are you absolutely certain that you want to become an N.R.C. agent?" he asked me. I glance over at Tessa, and even though I assume that despite what she said, she probably still isn't 100% okay with me becoming an agent, I am sure that I want to. "Yes, sir," I tell General Walker. "I'm certain that I want to become an agent." General Walker nods at me and is about to say something else, but Tessa interrupts him.
"I would like to become an agent as well,"
she says. Both General Walker and I look at her in surprise. I'm not sure if she actually wants to become an agent or if she just feels guilty, but either way, she says it with such confidence that it sounds like her mind is made up. "Are you sure, Tessa?" General Walker asks. I was about to ask her the same thing, because when we talked a few minutes ago, I tried to convince her that it's alright that she doesn't want to become an agent. I guess I did a pretty bad job. Instead of looking at General Walker, Tessa looks right at me and says,
"Yes, it's something that I've decided I want to do."
I half expected General Walker to argue with her and tell her that she can't become an agent because she's his daughter and it'll be too dangerous. Instead, he gives us a small toothless smile and says, "I'm very happy that both of you want to do this. I will have to check with the N.R.C's board of directors to see if they are okay with this. But for now, the two of you are to begin your training orientation. Head inside the gym and look for Corporal Price's office. He'll be your trainer." General Walker turns back around in his seat like that was that, and Tessa and I take the hint. We leave the Jeep, and almost as soon as we do, both Jeeps begin driving towards the office. Tessa and I ignore them and walk inside the gym. Even though we had seen the inside of the building yesterday during our tour, I still can't get over how massive it is. The workout and combat training sections of the gym are each roughly the size of an average commercial gym, and with them under the same roof, it makes the inside of the building look huge. Just inside the front door to the right, there's a long hallway of mostly closed doors that we figure has to be where Corporal Price's office is. Tess and I walk down the hallway and past most of the doors until we come across one marked Corporal Price. The door is closed, so I knock. A voice inside yells, "It's open!" I open the door and Tessa and I step into the office. The office is a bit cramped, with a locker off to one side, a table with a few papers scattered across it in the far corner, and a small wooden desk that sits directly across from the door. Behind the desk is a buff Asian man who looks to be in his late 20s. He's studying something on his laptop and isn't really paying attention to us. "Can I help you?" he asks us while not looking up. I expected the man to have an accent, but he seems to speak perfect English. Tessa and I look at each other, and then I ask the man, "Are you Corporal Price?" "That's what it says on the door," he responds. "General Walker sent us. Apparently you're supposed to give us the orientation to the training we'll be doing." Corporal Price finally looks up from his laptop and his eyes widen when he sees us. He steps out from behind his desk and holds out his hand. "I'm sorry about that. I wasn't sure when you guys were coming." I shake his hand and so does Tessa. Corporal Price wears the standard outfit for N.R.C. agents: black and orange combat pants, combat boots, and a black tank top. Now that he's out from behind his desk, I can see that he's about as muscular as I am, but I highly doubt that he got his muscles from a radioactive meteor.
"No problem, Corporal Price,"
Tessa says to him. He smiles at her and then says, "Just call me Price." "Sure thing, Price," I say. Price walks back over to his desk and shuts his laptop. He then grabs a notebook and pen out of the top drawer before turning back to us. "Come on," he says. "Let's get started." He walks out of his office and holds the door open for Tessa and I. Once the two of us are out of his office, he shuts the door behind us and then we follow him down the hallway and towards the gym area. The first thing I want to do is find out what the maximum amount of weight that you can lift is for some standard compound exercises. I'll get you guys to try the bench press first. We follow Price through the workout area of the gym and over to a free bench press. There are a few agents working out nearby, and I can tell that they're trying to act like they aren't paying attention to us. Price stops in front of the bench press and turns to us. "Okay," he says. "Which one of you would like to go first?" Tessa and I look at each other and shrug. "Ladies first?" I ask, and Tessa smiles. She then lies down on the bench. "You're a real gentleman," Price tells me, smiling. He then turns his attention to Tessa. "Okay, Tessa, have you ever used a bench press before?" She looks up at Price and shakes her head. "That's okay," Price says. "So what I'll get you to do is grab the bar with both hands. Make sure that your pinky finger is lined up with the first groove in the bar, then pinch your back like you're trying to hold a pencil between your shoulder blades, and finally plant the tops of your feet on the floor." Tessa follows his instructions carefully and slowly gets set up in the proper form to lift the bar. "That's perfect," Price tells her. "Now, since this is your first time using a bench press, I'll just get you to start out by lifting the bar for 12 reps so you can get comfortable. Whenever you're ready, lift up the bar and then lower it down until it touches your chest, and repeat that 12 times. Tessa takes a deep breath and then lifts the bar off the stand. She lifts the bar up and down a few times with ease, but looks a bit awkward. However, after taking a second to adjust her grip, she quickly finishes the last of the reps and then sets the bar back in the stand. How did that feel? Price asks her.
Pretty easy.
Tessa responds. Price smiles and then walks over to a nearby rack of metal plates that can be placed on the bar. He looks like he's about to grab two 25-pound plates, but instead grabs two 45-pound plates. Then he walks back over to the bench and hands me one of the plates. Put this on the other side of the bar, he tells me. I do as he says and walk over to the other side of the bench to slide the 45-pound plate on the bar. Price does the same thing with his plate on his side of the bar. He then grabs two silver clips off the floor and slides one on his side of the bar to keep the plate in place and throws the other one to me, and I do the same. Alright, Tessa, he says as soon as I slide my clip into place. Normally, I would never put this much weight onto the bar for someone who is lifting for the first time. However, I know how strong you two are, and I really want to test that. I'll also be spotting you if you have any trouble lifting this weight, okay?
Okay.
Tessa says as she grabs the bar and gets ready to lift it. Price walks around to the head of the bench and holds his hands onto the bar in case Tessa is unable to lift it. Seeing that his hands are there, Tessa lifts the bar off the rack and begins lifting it up and down as easily as she lifted the bar that didn't have any weight on it. Price pulls his hands away when he notices that she isn't even struggling. Once she does 12 reps again, she sets the bar back on the rack and sits up. I remember back when I went to the gym fairly consistently, I could barely lift 35-pound plates on either side for one rep. And here Tessa is lifting 45-pound plates like they're nothing. I feel myself getting a bit jealous of her before I remember that she has super strength and I used to only weigh a little over 100 pounds. Well done, Tessa, Price says. That was 135 pounds. Do you feel like you could lift more? Tessa smiles confidently.
Yeah, for sure. That didn't really feel very heavy.
Price walks over and grabs two more 45-pound plates from the nearby rack. Once again, he hands one to me and we each remove the clips on our sides of the bar, slide the new plates on, and put the clips back on. Price then moves back into place at the head of the bench with his arms extended below the bar. Whenever you're ready, Tessa. Tessa grabs the bar and lifts it up and down 12 times while only struggling a little bit on her last rep. She sets the bar back on the rack and sits up, looking at Price. So, that was 225 pounds, and from the looks of it, you can still lift more, can't you? Tessa nods.
Definitely.
Just like before, Price and I each add a 45-pound plate on each side of the bar. And once again, Tessa is able to lift the weight, although this time, she only manages to get 10 reps before having to put the bar back on the rack. Well, Tessa, you just lifted 315 pounds. I know you didn't quite get to 12, but since you were able to get to 10 reps, I'm guessing you're able to lift more? Tessa nods, but seems a bit less sure of herself this time.
Yeah, I'm good to try and lift more.
Price and I then put another plate on each side of the bench again, so that she's now lifting four 45-pound plates on each side. There used to be some really buff guys who would work out at my boxing gym, and even they could barely lift 3 plates on each side. I've never seen anyone bench this much weight in person. Tessa grabs the bar as soon as Price puts his hands underneath it to spot her. Alright, Tessa, he tells her. Remember to inhale whenever you lower the weight and then exhale when you raise it. I have a feeling this is going to be tough for you, but I'm sure that you've got it. I see a look of determination on Tessa's face as she takes a deep breath in and then lifts the bar off the rack. She lowers it down to her chest and then begins to push it back up while exhaling. There's so much weight on each side that the bar is bending slightly. Tessa seems to finally look like she's struggling. However, she doesn't give up and keeps pushing the bar until she pushes it high enough to re-rack it. As Tessa sits up on the bench, breathing heavily, Price walks around the bench with a huge smile on his face and gives her a high five. Tessa, you just lifted 405 pounds. That was utterly incredible, and considering this is your first time lifting, we can probably get that number even higher in a matter of weeks. Tessa seems pretty pleased with this. She gets up from the bench and turns to Price and I. After Price finishes marking down Tessa's weight in his notebook, he looks at me and says, "Alright Josh, let's see how you do." As I walk past Tessa to sit on the bench, she whispers to me,
Try and beat that.
"Oh, don't worry," I whisper back. "I will." I lie down on the bench, grab the bar, and begin getting in the proper form to lift it. After I stop moving, Price says to me from the head of the bench, "Okay Josh, normally I would start you out with a much lower weight than this, but considering Tessa's strength and what some of the other agents have told me about how strong you are, I feel pretty confident that you'll be able to lift this weight." Although I try to look macho and confident after having just watched Tessa lift over 400 pounds, I'm actually pretty nervous. The last time I used a bench press, I was able to lift maybe a fraction of the weight that is currently on the bar. However, I take a deep breath, trying to trust my new incredible strength, and lift the bar. Considering I'm lifting over 400 pounds, I was expecting to barely be able to lift the weight. However, after lifting the bar up and down a few times with ease, I realized that it feels like it weighs nothing. So after my 5th rep, I decide to show off a little and quickly rack the bar before lifting it back up with only one hand. I notice Price's face turn a bit pale for a moment before he sees that I'm able to easily lift the weight with one hand. After my 12th rep, I set the bar back down on the stand and sit up. Price actually laughs a bit and says, "I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that you can lift more." I smile. You know what? I think I can. Price and Tessa then walk over to the rack of weights and begin carrying over a bunch more 45-pound plates and sliding them on the bar. After a few minutes, they double the weight, so there are now 8 plates on each side of the bar. I figure Price probably isn't supposed to add this much weight on the bar so quickly, but since I had been showing off, he clearly wants to see me struggle. After they finish putting the plates on the bar, Price says, "Alright, hotshot, this is 765 pounds, twice as many plates as you just lifted. So, let's see how you do with this much weight, and please, use both hands this time." I nod and lie down on the bench again. After getting into the right position, I grab the bar and begin lifting it up and down. I can feel that it is a bit heavier this time, but honestly, it's not nearly as heavy as I was expecting it to be. I'm able to lift the bar with minimal effort. The only thing I find annoying is that there's so much weight on the bar that the sides are bending pretty badly. However, I still manage to finish a set of 12 and set the bar back on the rack. Price stares at me in awe for a moment before realizing that Tessa and I are looking at him. "So, obviously you can lift more weight than that. The only thing is that this bar can't hold any more weight. However, I think I might have a solution. Tessa, you come with me, and Josh, can you take all the weight off this bar while we're gone?" "No problem," I tell him as he and Tessa walk away. By the time I take all 16 plates off the bar and set them on the nearby weight racks, Price and Tessa return. Tessa's carrying a black barbell that's at least a few feet longer and way thicker than the standard one I was using. As Tessa gets closer, I take the bar off the rack and set it on a nearby bench press that doesn't have one. She sets the larger bar on our bench press and then steps back. "This is a specially made lead barbell that weighs 315 pounds. Price tells me. "The N.R.C. had a few of these made years ago when they thought the reactors we captured would be stable enough to lift them so we could test their strength. As I'm sure you've heard, none of them were stable enough, so it hasn't had any use. Until now." The three of us then begin loading all the plates I just took off the other bar onto this larger bar. I figured we would stop once we put the 8 plates on each side again, but since this bar is longer, Price gets us to keep loading on the weight until we add 3 more 45-pound plates on either side. Once Price is satisfied with this, Tessa and I slide the clips onto the bar while he counts all the plates. There are 11 on each side, so I'm about to try and lift 22 plates plus the 315-pound bar. "Okay," Price says, a bit out of breath. He then takes a moment to calculate the total weight on his phone. His eyes go a bit wide when he comes up with a number. "So this is 1,305 pounds, and honestly, I didn't realize it would be this heavy, so maybe we should take a few plates off." Price and Tessa move to take a few plates off the bar when I say, "No, it's okay. I've got this." The two of them look at me for a second, and I expect Price to argue, but instead, he just shrugs. "Well, if you're sure, then I'd say go for it. But Tessa, I'll get you to spot this time because I don't think I'll be able to help with this much weight." Tessa nods and stands at the head of the bench as I walk around it and lie down. I slowly get into position and grip the bar tightly, instantly feeling that it is noticeably thicker than the other one. My heart is beating in my chest as I look at the bar above me that's covered with weight. There's no way that I'll be able to lift this much weight, and a part of me wants to tell Price that it's okay for him to take a few of the plates off. From the head of the bench, Tessa must notice how nervous I look because she tells me,
"Hey, you've got this. Don't second guess yourself. Remember how strong you are now."
I nod, trying to look more confident. I take a few deep breaths, grip the bar even tighter, and then lift it off the rack and into the air. The second I lift it, I feel the weight of the bar threatening to crush me. But now that I have a feel for the weight, I know that I can handle it. I lower the bar to my chest and push it back up into the air twice before realizing that this weight doesn't really feel all that heavy, and I can probably lift a lot more. However, if I ask Price to increase the weight to something that I actually can't handle, not only would all that weight crush my ribs, but even Tessa wouldn't be strong enough to pull it off me. So I re-rack the bar after only lifting it twice and sit up on the bench. Price and Tessa are standing there smiling at me after having just watched me lift an impossible amount of weight. I also realized that all the agents who've been working out nearby completely stopped what they were doing and are staring at me in awe. If you guys need any jars opened, don't be afraid to ask. A few of them chuckle, but most just looked freaked out, and I really can't blame them. As the agents go back to exercising, I get up off the bench and turn to Price and Tessa. Price is smiling at my joke while Tessa's shaking her head. "So Josh, do you think you can lift any more weight, or do you just want to call that your max?" Price asks me hopefully because I'm sure he's tired of putting weight on the bar. Yeah, I tell Price, even though I know I can lift more weight. I think that's the max I can lift. Price seems satisfied with this. Good, he says, because we were running out of plates. As Price writes down my score in his notebook, Tessa and I put all the plates back on the nearby racks. After we finish, Price asks us, "Alright, are the two of you ready to move on?" I nod and Tessa asks,
"What else are we going to do?"
Price grins at us. "Oh, we're just getting started." We spend the rest of the morning doing almost every basic exercise in the gym. After we finish up with the bench press, we move on to the other common compound exercises: squatting, deadlifts, and overhead shoulder press. For every one of these compound exercises, Tessa and I both end up using the heavy barbell that I use for the bench press so we don't have to load as many plates onto it. All these exercises go pretty much the exact same way as the bench press, where Tessa goes first, and after Price gives her a quick lesson on the proper form for each exercise, she's able to lift about 3 times as much as the average person. Then I go and am able to lift nearly 10 times as much. The maximum weight that we can load onto the heavy barbell until we can't fit anymore is 14 plates on each side, which is equal to 1,575 pounds. And I'm proud to say that I hit that maximum weight on both squatting and deadlifts. I suppose I'm able to hit these weights because I'm not as nervous by the idea of lifting too much weight and getting stuck like I was on the bench press, because it's easier to safely get the weight off you during these exercises than it is for the bench press. My shoulder press is about the same as my bench press, which I'm also fine with because I find that movement a bit more awkward. After we're done with the compound exercises, we try moving on to some of the exercise machines in the gym, but we quickly discover that both Tessa and I are easily able to lift the highest weights on them. So we mostly stick to dumbbell and bodyweight exercises for a high number of reps. The one thing I start to notice as we exercise is that usually I would begin getting sore and tired after a short while, but today, it seems that the longer I exercise for, the stronger and more energized I feel. It looks like Tessa is the same way, and when I ask Price about this, he tells us that because our hearts are beating more quickly to pump more oxygen to our muscles, the radiation that is in our cells is also getting quickly pumped throughout our bodies, giving us an increase in strength and energy. When he tells us this, I get a bit worried about the idea of becoming more radioactive. So I check my bracelet that shows my radiation levels, and luckily, they're only slightly higher than normal, which is a relief. About halfway through our workout, I begin really wishing that I had some music to listen to. It's pretty strange working out without it, and I guarantee that I'd be even more energized if I had my earphones. Price is kind enough to offer to try and find me a pair, but I tell him it's okay since I don't even have my phone. I'm really starting to regret lending it to Ty back at the school. That guy never returns anything. After spending what I guess is over 2 hours at the gym, we do pretty well every exercise I know, as well as a bunch of exercises that I've never even heard of. Price finishes writing down a few final things in his notebook before telling us that we can go grab some lunch. "I'm gonna go talk to General Walker about your scores while the two of you eat," he tells us. "After you finish eating, meet me outside the firing range." Sounds good, I tell him as Tessa and I turn and walk out of the building. As the two of us head towards the bunks, I ask Tessa, "So what do you think of the training so far?"
I'm actually really enjoying it.
She says, "Yeah, I like it too." We walk for a few moments in silence until Tessa says,
"Do you feel any different because of the way you look now?"
"What do you mean?"
"Well,"
she says,
"not to be rude, but before getting hit by that meteor, you were pretty skinny. Now you can lift over 1,000 pounds and you look like a professional athlete. So, do you feel any different?"
Surprisingly enough, I haven't really given that much thought. Obviously, I'm aware that I look a lot different than before, and I'm able to lift an impossible amount of weight. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that if I didn't notice all my newly developed muscle when I was first exposed to the radiation, I might not have even realized that anything was different. No, I tell her, I don't really feel any different. What about you? Tessa looks at me with wide eyes.
"What do you mean? Do I look different?"
I feel my face turning red because I just assume that, like me, Tessa has noticed how different she looks now compared to before the meteor had hit. But since she obviously hasn't noticed, I have no clue how I'm going to tell her without accidentally saying the wrong thing. Well, Tessa, I begin awkwardly but stop when Tessa starts laughing.
"I'm just kidding. Of course I realize I look different. It was cute of you to get so worried about saying the wrong thing, though."
After letting out a massive sigh of relief, I laugh lightly too, thankful that I don't have to have an awkward conversation with Tessa about her change in appearance. "Well, thanks for making me feel like a jerk for bringing that up," I tell her. She finally stops laughing.
"That's my revenge for scaring me last night when you acted like I hurt your back. Anyway, I was asking if you felt any different because I don't, which is kind of strange."
I don't think it's weird that we both now look a lot different than we did yesterday, but don't feel any difference. I do think it's weird that we both got superpowers from a radioactive space rock. She chuckles.
"I suppose that's true."
Plus, it does feel a lot easier when exercising now than it did before I got my abilities. I'm assuming that's the same for any person who gets in great shape in a short period of time. She nods again.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
The two of us make it to the bunks and walk inside the building. We head through the lobby and enter the cafeteria, which is more crowded than we've seen it because we're actually having a meal at a normal time. Luckily, there still seems to be plenty of empty seats since the cafeteria is so large. Price had mentioned during our workout that it's important for us to eat a lot of protein. So, Tessa and I each grab a chicken breast, a few spoonfuls of rice, and some mixed steamed vegetables before sitting down at the closest empty seat. Like usual, most of the nearby agents are looking at us and whispering to each other. I should be getting used to their looks by now, but I still find it uncomfortable. The two of us eat quickly while chatting a bit about how excited we are about heading to the firing range after lunch. After we finish eating, we hurriedly make our way back over to the gym. The walk doesn't seem as long this time, probably because we're both a bit giddy about the idea of shooting a gun for the first time. We find Price standing outside the firing range where he said he'd meet us, and standing there talking to him is Jenna Walker and a few agents. Tessa and I walk up to them and awkwardly stand there waiting for them to finish their conversation and acknowledge us. A part of me thinks Jenna Walker might be doing this since Tessa and I kept him and his agents waiting this morning outside the bunks. However, after a minute, they finish talking and Jenna Walker heads towards the gym exit without saying anything to us, followed by the other agents. With everyone else gone, Price turns to us. You two already had lunch? We both nod and simultaneously say,
Yes, sir.
He smiles. Good, now follow me. Price opens the door to the firing range for us, and Tessa and I step inside. The second Price closes the door behind us, the sounds of the nearby guns being fired from the other three agents in the range feel like someone is setting off fireworks inside my ears. As much as I want to head right back out the door where it's nice and quiet, I try to tune out the noise as I follow Price to the furthest lane from the door. Behind the furthest lane at the end of the firing range, there's a large weapons storage room which contains about every single gun on the face of the earth, except for heavy artillery weapons like an RPG or a flamethrower. Although shooting one of those weapons would probably destroy most of the firing range, I'm still disappointed that we aren't able to fire one because it would have been super badass. However, I don't mention this to Price because I'm too busy admiring all the other cool automatic weapons that are here. After briefly showing us the weapon storage room, Price doesn't take anything out of it and instead pulls a box out from under the shelf of the window of our lane and sets it on top of the shelf. He opens up the box and pulls out a large black pistol. No, he tells us. At the school, the two of you have seen N.R.C. agents use rifles that fire electric bullets. We usually try and use these guns in combat to avoid killing. However, we do still use normal guns for target practice, and we expect every one of our agents to know how to shoot them just in case something happens to our electric rifles. After Price takes a moment to inspect the pistol, he holds the gun in his hand and says, "This is a Combat Glock 19, the standard lethal pistol for N.R.C. agents. To unload the clip, you push this small button on the side of the gun to release it, and then pull the slide back to empty the bullet that is in the chamber." He demonstrates this as he tells us, and sure enough, the clip that's in the gun falls into his hand. Then he pulls back on the slide and the bullet that was in the chamber falls onto the shelf. To reload the clip, you want to push a full clip back into the gun and make sure it clicks. You then pull back on the slide to cock the gun, which pushes the first bullet into the chamber. Again, Price demonstrates this to us as he talks. He loads in the same clip that he just took out of the gun and we hear a sharp click. Then he pulls back on the top of the gun to cock it. Price points to a small button on the side of the gun near the trigger. Finally, he says, "Make sure that your safety is off when you go to fire the gun. It would be pretty embarrassing if you go to shoot someone and the safety was on." Even though he sounds like he's joking, I take his comment seriously. Price hands the gun to me and says, "Now repeat what I just did." I take the gun from him, and at first, it feels a bit awkward in my hand, but I figure that I'll get used to it. I try and replicate exactly what Price just showed us and push the button on the side of the gun to release the clip. Then I pull back on the slide to empty the bullet out of the chamber. Finally, I reload the gun by pushing the clip back into it, pulling back on the slide to cock it, and then turning the safety off and on again. Price nods his head in approval as I pass the gun back to him. Price takes the gun from me and says, "Very good. As long as you remember those steps, you'll be fine." He then hands the gun to Tessa. "Your turn, Tessa." Tessa takes the gun and repeats what I just did. She then hands the gun back to Price. "Great job as well, Tessa," he tells her as he takes back the gun. Price then turns back to the box that he set on the shelf and pulls out 2 full clips of ammo and 3 sets of earmuffs and safety glasses. And then he sets the box onto the shelf. I'm so excited at the idea of putting on the earmuffs to drown out the noise of the other agent shooting that I go to immediately grab them, but Price holds his hand out to get me to wait a second. The number one rule of gun safety is to always have it pointing at the floor with the safety on until you intend to fire it, he tells us. When you're ready to shoot, you are going to hold the gun with both hands because although it may look cool cooler to use one hand, you won't be nearly as accurate. You will then hold the gun out in front of you at eye level and aim it at the target. Also, remember that the kickback is a lot stronger than most people think, so brace yourselves for that when you pull the trigger. Price then hands us the earmuffs and safety glasses, and Tessa and I both put them on, grateful to have an escape from the noise. After he puts his safety gear on as well, Price reloads the gun, aims at the bullseye at the end of the lane, and pulls the trigger. Even through the earmuffs, the sound of his gun being fired is almost deafening. Tessa and I watch Price unload the clip into the target, and it's hard not to be impressed. His aim is incredibly accurate, and he manages to hit the center of the target almost every shot. The few shots that he doesn't hit bullseyes still aren't off by much. After Price empties the clip, he sets the gun down on the shelf and turns to us. So, who's up? Tessa and I look at each other and, like every other time Price has asked us this question, just shrug. Since I'm standing closer to him, I say, I guess I'll go. I unload the empty clip, grab one of the unused ones from the shelf, and load it into the gun. The old target that Price had shot at is being carried away by what resembles a conveyor belt that runs across the ceiling. By the time I finish reloading the gun and I'm ready to shoot, a fresh new target is waiting for me. Before I pull the trigger, Price says, don't just go all out and try to shoot as fast as you can. Take your time, aim at where you think the bullet will go, and pull the trigger. If the bullet doesn't hit where you wanted it to, then adjust your aim and try again. I follow Price's advice and take my time when aiming the gun. I point it at the middle of the target, center myself a bit, and when I think I'm lined up perfectly, I pull the trigger. The shot hits the dead center of the bullseye. Considering this is the first time that I've ever fired a gun, I'm pretty proud of myself. Holy shit, I say while staring at the target. Price looks just as surprised as I am. With a huge smile on his face, he says, great first shot. Now unload the rest of the clip and see if you can keep your shots consistent. I do as he says and unload the rest of the clip into the target. Almost every single one of my shots is a perfect bullseye. I really wasn't expecting to get even remotely close to the center of the target, let alone hit it nearly every shot. I end up losing track of how many bullets I fired until I pull the trigger and the gun just clicks, telling me that it's empty. Awesome shooting, Josh, Price says once I set the gun down on the shelf. I pick up a hint of jealousy in his voice, but I suppose I would be a bit jealous too if some kid picked up a gun for the very first time and was more accurate than a man who has probably been around firearms for years. Thanks, I tell Price as he picks up the gun and hands it to Tessa. You're up, Tessa, Price tells her. Tessa takes the gun and steps in front of the lane. While she reloads it, the conveyor belt on the ceiling replaces the target I had just shot with a new one. Same thing, Tessa, Price tells her as she squares up to shoot. Take your time, line up a shot where you want it to go, and be cautious of the kickback. Tessa nods, but stays focused on the target. She holds the gun out in front of her and fires her first shot. It ends up hitting the second most outer ring of the target, so she readjusts her aim and tries again. This one hits only slightly closer to the center of the circle. She continues to shoot and readjust until she unloads the entire clip. All of her shots hit around the third or fourth closest ring to the center of the circle, which may not be as accurate as Price or I, but it's still good considering it's her first time shooting. Great shooting, Tessa, Price tells her as she sets the gun back on the shelf. She looks a bit disappointed with how well she did. Price senses this and adds, that was really impressive shooting for your first time ever holding a gun. However, if you're not super happy with those results, then don't worry. You will get better over time. Not all of us can just pick up a gun and have perfect accuracy. As he says this, he looks over at me. I hold up my hands in surrender. I'm sorry, I can't help it if I'm amazing at shooting, I say sarcastically. Tessa smiles a bit, and Price shakes his head. Price then takes the box that he keeps everything in out from under the shelf and places it back onto the shelf. He takes 6 fresh clips as well as 2 more identical guns out of the box and places his safety equipment inside before setting the box back onto the shelf. Price turns back to us and says, alright, I'll be back in a few minutes. In the meantime, I want the two of you to keep practicing your aim. You can even try shooting with 2 pistols if you feel comfortable enough. With that being said, Price heads out of the firing range and leaves 2 teenagers unsupervised with loaded guns. I doubt my mom would approve of that, but since it means that we get to shoot more, I'm all for it. I turn to Tessa and smile. Let's get to shooting, shall we? By the time Price comes back, Tessa is finishing up her last clip. She had spent the time focusing on improving her accuracy, whereas I had tried to figure out all the different ways you could fire a gun. First, I tried shooting with one hand and found that I was still pretty accurate, so then I tilted the gun sideways to look like some wannabe gangster. Once I spent an entire clip shooting like that, I tried going dual wield and shooting 2 guns at the same time, and even though I was still managing to hit the target, I wasn't as accurate as I was with just one gun. While I was doing this, I could feel Tessa staring daggers into the back of my head because I was still more accurate than her. Tessa had improved her accuracy a bit in the 3 clips that she had used up, but not by much. As she fires the final few bullets in her last clip, she's doing some of her best shooting. Once she finishes, Price says, "That was some great shooting, Tessa. I can already see improvement." Tessa smiles at the compliment.
Thanks.
Price grabs the box from under the shelf and puts the 3 guns, all the empty clips, and her safety glasses and earmuffs inside. As soon as I pass in my earmuffs, I miss having them on because the exploding sounds of nearby gunshots instantly begin hurting my ears. Price takes the box and sets it on an empty shelf in the weapons storage closet. He then walks back over to us and says, "Alright, we're all done in the firing range for today. Now it's time to move on to the final part of your training." Tessa and I follow Price out of the firing range and into the main part of the gym. As soon as Price shuts the doors behind us, I'm grateful to finally be away from the sound of gunfire. And from the expression on Tessa's face, so is she. Price leads us to the back part of the gym that's dedicated to combat training. We pass by 4 wrestling rings, 2 of which are occupied by agents sparring, and a dozen or so punching bags that are hanging from the ceiling. About half the punching bags are being used by agents, so Price picks one that's furthest away from everyone else. After lightly smacking the punching bag, Price turns to us and says, "Before we begin your combat training, I would like to see the 2 of you punch and kick this punching bag a few times." "Sounds easy enough," I tell him. Then I turn to Tessa and ask, "Do you want to go first this time?" Tessa shrugs.
Sure.
She squares up in front of the punching bag and holds up her fists. As she's about to punch the bag, Price holds out his arm to stop her. "Just hold on for 1 second, Tessa," he says. "Could you make a fist for me?" Confused, Tessa holds out her fist for Price to look at. I look at it as well and figure out that Price stopped her from throwing a punch because Tessa has her fingers wrapped around her thumb, whereas she should have her thumb outside her fingers. Price smiles politely. "Tessa, when you make a fist, have your thumb on the outside of your fingers. If you have your fingers wrapped around your thumb, then you'll end up breaking it when you punch something." Tessa's face turns a bit red from embarrassment, and I realize that Tessa has probably never punched anyone or anything before. No wonder she doesn't know how to make a fist. After making a proper fist this time, Tessa once again squares up in front of the punching bag. She takes a deep breath and then punches the bag as hard as she can. Even though it's a sloppy punch, the bag flies back on the chain. And I remember from when I used to box that these punching bags are super heavy and hard to move. Tessa takes her time squaring up again before throwing another punch. This time, her punch is much more controlled and she puts some power behind it. As soon as she makes contact, the punching bag goes flying back in the chain with even more force than her first hit. The bag swings back towards her quickly, but instead of stepping out of the way, Tessa kicks the bag with so much power that it once again goes swinging back in the other direction. She then steps away from the punching bag and looks at Price. Once the bag slows down a bit, Price steps behind it and grabs the bag to stop it from swinging. He then keeps holding on to the bag so that it won't move when Tessa hits it. "Okay," Price tells Tessa, "keep going until I tell you to stop." The moment Price says this, Tessa starts punching and kicking the bag as hard as she can. At first, it doesn't really seem like she has any pattern or style to her hits, and Price barely has to hold the bag to stop it from moving. But after a couple of minutes, she begins to develop a rhythm with her hits and starts punching the bag with so much strength that Price struggles to keep it from moving. Finally, as Tessa's punches are beginning to slow down, Price wheezes out, "Alright, that's enough." Tessa steps away from the punching bag and walks over to where I'm standing. As Price comes out from behind the bag, I notice how sweaty and exhausted he looks. Tessa is obviously way stronger than anyone else he's trained. Once Price catches his breath, he says, "That was a great start, Tessa. Some of your first few punches were a bit sloppy, but I noticed that towards the end, you began to develop a rhythm that you were more comfortable with. You were also throwing some kicks, which is awesome because not many people will try that their first time. Overall, your form is very good for a beginner, and we'll continue to improve it, as well as teach you some other punches like hooks and uppercuts." Tessa nods.
Sounds good.
Price then turns to me. "Alright, hotshot, let's see what you've got." I step in front of the punching bag and square up, ready to throw some punches. I look over at Price, expecting him to hold the bag for me, but he doesn't move. Instead, he just stands there and shakes his head. "I need to make sure that it's safe for me to stand behind that punching bag first," he says. "Let me see a few punches and kicks, and then I'll hold the bag for you." His comment rattles me a little bit and makes me wonder if I'm really so strong that it's too dangerous for someone to just simply hold a punching bag for me. I try to shake that thought out of my head as I turn my attention back to the punching bag. Remembering my old warm-up that I used to do at the beginning of boxing practice, I shake my arms and shoulders to loosen up, lightly punch the bag a few times to get a feel for it, and then I square up and hold my fist out in front of me. I stare at the punching bag for a second and then throw a right jab as hard as I can, aiming for the center of the bag. I was expecting the bag to go flying backwards on the chain just like it did for Tessa, but to my surprise, my hand goes straight through it. Tessa tries not to laugh as I struggle to free my hand. After a few pulls, I manage to free it, but when I do, sand starts pouring out of the bag and onto the floor at my feet. Price quickly jogs over to a nearby storage room as I press my palm against the hole in the bag to slow the falling sand. Tessa walks over to me and tries to help.
That was quite the punch,
she tells me. As I'm thinking up a response, Price returns from the storage room with some duct tape. While he quickly patches up the hole, he says, "It certainly was not quite the punch." Feeling a bit offended, I ask, "What do you mean?" Price finishes covering the hole in duct tape and says, "It was accurate, but it was way too strong. If you ever punch someone with that amount of force, you'll end up shattering their bones." I stare at Price with wide eyes and feel my face turn pale. I was finally beginning to understand just how strong I am because of how much weight I had been able to lift this morning. However, this is the first time I realize how dangerous my strength truly is. If that punch I just threw is capable of breaking bones, then if I punch someone in the head, I could kill them. Price can probably sense what I'm thinking because he puts a hand on my shoulder and says, "I know how scary that sounds, but don't worry. I'm going to teach you how to control your strength so that never happens." "How?" I ask. He sets the duct tape on the floor nearby and then stands in front of the part of the punching bag that he had just patched up. Price then motions for me to join him, so I walk over and stand next to him. When most people throw a punch, they try and put as much force behind it as possible, Price says. Obviously, you can't do this though. What you have to do is throw a punch that's hard enough to knock someone out, but isn't too hard that you kill or seriously injure them. I run my hand through my hair. Okay, but how am I supposed to know how hard to punch? Price rubs his chin. That's a fair question. We might be able to get a hold of a device that can measure how hard you punch, but for now, we're just going to judge by using this punching bag. He lightly slaps the bag. Now I want you to punch the bag again, but this time, not as hard. I square up in front of the bag and, remembering how my first punch went right through it, I hit the bag so lightly that it doesn't even move. Price shakes his head. Harder. I punch the bag with a bit more force and it slightly moves back. Harder. Again, I punch the bag, except this time with about a quarter of the strength I used for my very first punch. The bag moves back a bit further this time. Harder! I take a deep breath, concentrating on the amount of strength I'm going to put behind this punch. I then hit the bag with about a third of the strength I used for my first hit. When my fist makes contact, the bag goes flying back on the chain just like it did for Tessa. Once the bag stops swinging, I notice that my punch caused a small hole to open up in the duct tape of the recently patched hole. Although no sand comes out of it, Price covers it with a small piece of tape just to be safe. "That is the amount of strength that you need to use when you punch, Josh," Price tells me. "It's just hard enough to knock out your opponent, but not so hard that it causes them any serious damage." I shake my head in frustration. How am I supposed to punch with that same amount of force every time? Price looks me straight in the eye. By training. He must realize that his answer doesn't really make me feel much better, so he adds, "I won't lie to you. It's going to be very difficult and frustrating at first. But eventually, you will always be able to throw a punch with that amount of strength without even having to think about it." That answer does help calm my nerves a bit. "Alright," I say. "So do you want me to keep practicing on the punching bag?" Price looks at his watch. "No, I think that's enough of the punching bag for today. Why don't the two of you come with me?" Tessa and I follow him over to the closest empty boxing ring. The agents who had been sparring in it had just finished and are now practicing on some punching bags. Price steps up onto the ring and holds the ropes up for Tessa and I to duck under. "Alright," Price says as he steps inside the ring. "I'm now going to teach you some basic hand-to-hand combat." I begin to get excited because the one thing that I've been looking forward to all day is learning how the N.R.C agents fight. Even though I had some fighting experience from boxing, I was never a very good fighter. In fact, if I hadn't been hit by the meteor, I would still have the bruises on my face from Mike to prove it. "Josh, would you mind stepping forward, please?" Price says. I do as he says and step towards him so that the two of us are facing each other in the center of the ring. Price just stands there looking at me, and I expect him to explain what I'm supposed to do, but he just remains silent. Just as I'm about to say something, he quickly steps forward and swings at me. His punch was going to hit me right in the face, but I lean back so it sails harmlessly past me. Surprised, I take a step back and look at him in annoyance. "What the hell was that for?" I ask him. Price also steps back and then holds his hands up in surrender. That was just to show you how your reflexes are at a superhuman level, just like your strength. When you're not expecting a punch, your instincts take over and you're able to easily dodge it. But when you see the punch coming, he stops talking and walks towards me with his fists up, ready to fight. This time, I put my fists up as well and try to anticipate when he's going to punch me. The second Price gets close enough to me, he throws a left jab at my face that I'm able to block with my arm. However, I don't see his second punch coming and he's able to hit me in the gut with a low left uppercut. Although the punch doesn't hurt, I instinctively jump back and try to put some distance between us. I look back over at Price, expecting him to be standing there confidently, but instead, he's holding his wrist with a pained expression on his face. That hit must have hurt him a lot more than it hurt me. Are you alright? I ask him. He shakes his injured wrist and tries to put on a strong front, but it's obvious that his wrist is really hurting. I forgot how tough your skin is, he says. From now on, when you fight, try not to flex your muscles or else you'll end up breaking somebody's hand. Obviously, he's speaking on his own behalf, and I feel bad that he's in so much pain. Luckily, since this is a demonstration, he didn't punch me very hard, so I assume there probably isn't anything seriously wrong with his hand. From now on though, I'm really going to have to be careful that I don't flex while I fight, or else the next time Price or whoever else punches me, they might seriously injure themselves. I figure that since Price is still injured, I won't have to worry about him throwing another punch. However, just as I let my guard down, Price comes running towards me and once again swings at my head. I barely manage to duck under his punch in time. When I stand back up, I try to punch him in the side with a left hook, but he easily blocks it. Price then kicks my left leg to try and get me off balance, and it works. As I try to steady myself, Price grabs my left arm, pulls it over his shoulder, and then throws me to the ground. As I look up at him from the ground in frustration, he smiles down at me. Like I was saying, if you don't see the attack coming, then your reflexes take over and you're able to easily dodge an attack. But if you're expecting the attack, then you have to rely on your fighting skills, which I don't have. I respond angrily. Price points at me like I just solved a difficult math equation. He then holds out his hand to pull me off the floor, which I take. Not yet, he says as I get to my feet, but I'm going to help the two of you become incredible fighters. Even though I'm still a bit pissed off that Price threw me to the floor just to prove his point, the idea of him training Tessa and I to become really good at fighting does help improve my mood. So what's first? I ask him. Let's get to work, shall we? For the next 2 hours, I learned more about fighting than I did in 6 years of boxing. Price teaches Tessa and I a fighting style that's a mix of boxing, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, and Krav Maga. A lot of the boxing components are things that I already know, like how you need to keep your hands up in front of your face and always be on the move when you're fighting, different combinations of attacks you can use, and to make sure to move your feet when you throw a punch for extra momentum. The other martial arts styles are more focused on how to read your opponent and predict their next move, how to use your opponent's own momentum against them, relying more on your reflexes during a fight, and kicking your opponent in the face. That last focus is my favorite. Price may have annoyed me by throwing me to the ground as an example when we first stepped into the ring, but I have to admit that he's a great instructor. He explains everything to us slowly to make sure that Tessa and I know what we're supposed to be doing. He corrects our forms whenever he notices that we're doing something wrong, and he never gets frustrated or annoyed when one of us can't get a move right. He just gets us to keep doing it until we nail it. Considering Tessa didn't even know the right way to make a fist a few hours ago, I had been worried that she wouldn't be a very good fighter, but I was completely wrong. She catches on to things just as fast as I do, is super fast and agile, and is a lot better than I am at most of the kicking focused moves. Initially, when the two of us spar against each other, I take it easy on her because I don't want to hurt her. However, I quickly realized that she could easily kick my ass if I hold back too much.
Come on, Josh,
she says when one of her hard kicks land.
You're not going to let a girl beat you up, are you?
From then on, I completely stop holding back when fighting Tessa. Although I'm able to beat her every time we spar, she's still a very capable fighter. I may be a lot stronger than her, but she's faster and really good at predicting my attacks. After we finish sparring for like the 50th time, Price finally says, "Okay guys, we're done for the day." Tessa and I walk over to the side of the ring where Price is standing. At first, I thought he was joking because he had teased the idea of us being done for a while now, but I can tell from his expression that he's being serious this time. Price holds the ropes up for me to duck under, which I do, feeling very relieved that we're finally done for the day. Even though I've enjoyed every minute of our training session, the exhaustion from all the hard work I put in today is finally beginning to catch up with me. I turn around as Tessa and then Price hops down from the ring. Price tells the two of us, "Why don't the two of you head back to your rooms and get showered and change for dinner? I'll meet you in the cafeteria in about a half hour. I just have to finish up some paperwork first." The three of us walk through the gym together before parting ways. Price heads towards his office as Tessa and I walk out the door. As soon as we're out of the building, I ask Tessa, "So what did you think of that?"
You mean the combat training?
"Yeah." She smiles.
Honestly, it was awesome. I did so much better than I thought I would.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really enjoyed it too. I also didn't really think you would be that good at fighting, but you did amazing. She looks at me, her expression now serious.
Why didn't you think I would be good at fighting? Because I'm a girl?
My eyes widen as I realize that I offended her. No, not at all.
God, you're sexist.
Tessa says to me. My mouth is wide open as I struggle to come up with the right thing to say to resolve this. Fortunately, I don't have to because Tessa suddenly bursts out laughing.
I am just kidding. I didn't think I would be a very good fighter either.
I stare at her. You have a very twisted sense of humor. She smiles.
Why, thank you.
The two of us make it to the bunks and step inside. We head through the lobby where the friendly blonde receptionist who was working last night waves to us as we walk by her desk. After waving back, Tessa and I hop into an elevator, I swipe my keycard, and Tessa presses the number 10 button. We then ride the elevator up to our floor while talking about our favorite moves we learned today during training. After a quick elevator ride, the doors open and Tessa and I step out onto our floor. We walk down the hallway, but as we get close to our rooms, we notice that the doors to both our rooms are wide open. Tessa and I stop and exchange a worried look because we had each closed our doors before we left this morning.
I thought we both shut our doors.
Tessa says, we did. I say as I move towards them. I stop just before I reach my door and cautiously peek inside the room. I was expecting to find a bunch of people in hazmat suits tearing the room apart, but instead, all I see is a single man standing on a stepladder with his back to the door. Relieved that this isn't anything serious, I motion for Tessa to follow me as I step inside the room. I knock on the wall to get the man's attention and he turns around. When he sees us standing there, the man climbs down from his ladder. The man wears a pair of denim overalls over a dirty white t-shirt. He's completely bald, looks to be in his early 50s, and has a large gut, but a kind face. You must be Josh and Tessa, the man says while smiling. It's nice to meet you. The name's Hank. Hank is holding something in his left hand that I can't quite make out, so he holds out his free hand for me to shake, and I do. As he shakes Tessa's hand, he must read the confused looks on our faces because he says, "You're probably wondering what I'm doing here. Well, I was asked to take down the cameras in both of your rooms because it was obvious that neither of you liked them." His answer takes me by surprise because when I had put the tape over the cameras last night, I expected some agents to charge into my room and demand that I remove it. Instead, General Walker asked someone to take all the cameras down just because I don't like them. I wonder how far General Walker is willing to go to keep Tessa and I happy. Hank turns and tosses the object he's holding into a cardboard box beside the bottom of the stepladder. I look inside the box to find that it's full of cameras, and I realize that was what he had been holding. Hank then begins folding up his stepladder. "You guys caught me at a good time," he says. "I already finished taking down all the cameras in your room, Tessa. I just forgot to shut the door, and that was the last camera in this room." Hank finishes folding up his stepladder and holds it with one arm. He then bends down and picks up the box of cameras. Now that he has everything, Hank walks past us to get to the door, but stops before leaving the room. "I was also told to let you know that if you have a problem with something," Hank tells us, "then please just tell General Walker instead of putting duct tape over it." I smile, a bit embarrassed. "Thank you, Hank." He smiles back. "No problem, Josh. I hope the two of you have a lovely rest of your day." Once Hank begins walking down the hallway whistling, I look around my room at all the spots where the cameras used to be. I feel a sense of peace knowing that there is now nothing watching me at the moment, except for Tessa, who is still standing in the doorway. I turn to her and smile. "So you don't like being watched either, eh?" I ask her. She shakes her head.
It's pretty hard to sleep when you can feel someone watching every single thing that you do.
I nod. Yeah, I agree. Tessa then turns to leave the room, but says,
I'm going to go get ready for dinner. I'll see you in a little bit.
"See ya," I respond as she walks out of the room, shutting the door behind her. After Tessa leaves, I take a quick shower and then put on a pair of jeans and a clean t-shirt. As I pull the t-shirt over my head, my eyes fall on the top of the cabinet where I had set my keycard beside my wallet. Suddenly, I remember that something else is supposed to be on top of the cabinet. The picture of my father. Terrified that my picture is gone, I search around the room to see if it might have fallen on the floor, but I don't see it. What I do see is that the room phone on my nightstand, the same phone I had tried to use to call my mother last night, is also gone. The only person who has been in my room is Hank, and I highly doubt that the kind handyman stole my picture and phone. I take a moment to think hard about who in the N.R.C. would have a motive for taking my picture, my one reminder of my life outside this place, and my room phone, my one way to communicate with the outside world. The only conclusion I can come to is that General Walker instructed an agent to break into my room and steal these things while I was at training, but I can't understand why he would want the phone to be taken if it's already broken. However, the phone isn't the thing I care about. The fear that my picture, the one thing I had to remind me of my father, was gone and that General Walker might be responsible is enough to make me forego any lack of logic in my conclusion. General Walker had taken the picture of my father, and he is not going to get away with it.